Darth Maul was born to Mother Talzin in 54 BBY on the secluded world of Dathomir. As Zabrak males, he and his brother Ferrell were Nightbrothers, and in accordance with Dathomiri tradition, the children were tattooed before their first birthdays. Maul revealed later in life that he once had a real name, but had long since forgotten it. Whilst Maul was still a child, his mother formed an alliance with Darth Sidious, the Dark Lord of the Sith, and the two exchanged dark side alchemy and Nightsister magicks, enhancing both their power. When Sidious would arrive to meet Talzin, Maul would hide away in his chamber, afraid of the mysterious man and anxious about Talzin's increasing connection to him. Maul grew up in the Nightbrother village with his brother Ferrell, having to care for his younger, weaker sibling due to Talzin's constant absence from the community. As a result of his Force sensitivity, he always felt a connection to nature and the forest beyond their home. Had his circumstances been different, perhaps this connection might have been cultivated into something positive, and he could have one day become a formidable Jedi. However, his cruel upbringing would steer the young Zabrak onto a far darker path. Sidious eventually forced Talzin to hand over Maul, threatening to back out of his pledge to make her his apprentice. A Nightbrother kidnapped him the following morning when he returned home, throwing him into a pit and denying him the chance to say goodbye to his mother. Maul was subjected to months of brutal abuse, all engineered by Sidious. His keeper's two sons beat him until he was unable to stand and only fed him scraps, keeping him malnourished. As a result of this, Maul's perceptions were distorted, and his affection for his mother morphed into bitterness and loathing for abandoning him. When rumours spread of a man arriving for the selection of a warrior apprentice, Maul's keeper refused to let him join, but he broke down his sealed door using the dark side and followed anyway. Maul discovered, however, that the visitor to the selection arena was Sidious, the man he hated most. A fit of uncontrollable rage led him to force choke the two brothers, then the keeper, all in front of Sidious and Talzin. To Talzin's dismay, Sidious named Maul the winner and his new apprentice. Sidious kidnapped Maul and fled Dathomir, leaving Talzin pledging to reclaim her kidnapped son and exact vengeance on Sidious. At some point following this, she had a third son, Savage, although he remained completely unaware of his eldest brother's existence. Maul trained as a Sith apprentice under Sidious's direction, eventually earning the name Darth Maul. He was taught to be merciless against his foes, and learned to wield a dual-bladed lightsaber, eventually creating his own through a series of brutal trials. Sidious took Maul to Malachor to see the frozen remains of a momentous fight between the Jedi and Sith millennia before. Maul was forced to breathe in the ashes of Sith warriors who had been killed there, causing him to have visions of his Sith brethren being slaughtered by the Jedi. After this experience, Maul yearned for vengeance against the Jedi Order, who had vanquished the Sith millennia before. Darth Maul planned to restore the Sith to galactic prominence, under the guidance of his wise and powerful master. One day, Sidious ordered Maul to the Kelluk system to deal with pirates interfering with the Trade Federation in a futile attempt to quench his lust for revenge. He discovered that the cartel's leader had kidnapped a Jedi Padawan who would be auctioned off to the highest bidder. In an effort to find the location of the auction, Maul hired a crew of bounty hunters, Cad Bane, Aurra Sing, Vordelio, and True Trill Tech. They located and boarded a space station to attend the auction, where they found the Jedi Padawan, a Twi'lek called Eldra Catus. After a narrow escape from the pirates, their ship crashed on a nearby moon, and Maul revealed his Sith origin to the Padawan, beginning a fierce battle between the two Force wielders. Catus used her lightsaber to create a landslide, burying Maul. Maul rose from the rubble and stabbed her in the chest. He was recovered by Cad Bane and the other bounty hunters and returned to his master on Coruscant. He informed Lord Sidious of his unquenched need for Jedi blood. Despite the fact that his apprentice had disobeyed him, he was impressed with the young Zabrak. After all, vengeance, selfishness, and disobedience were the hallmarks of any good Sith. To resume his Sith training, Maul and Sidious returned to Malachor. After inhaling the ashes of the long-dead Sith, Maul saw a Force vision similar to the one he had years prior. The vision showed Maul as a Jedi. He had protected a fellow Zabrak from a monster, and to honour him, Maul was asked to dine with others of his kind. However, after partially breaking free from the hallucinations, he felt disgusted by the Zabrak's worship of the Jedi, and slaughtered all of them, proving that he truly did embrace the way of the Sith. After returning to reality, Maul was commended by his master, and recognised that destroying the Jedi would require more than just his fury and emotions. It would also take strategy, patience and foresight, something he had yet to learn from his master. Maul's patience was soon to be rewarded. Sidious plotted with the Trade Federation to launch an attack on his homeworld of Naboo in order to destabilise the Republic. To settle the matter, Supreme Chancellor Valorum dispatched Jedi Knights Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi, but after the Federation failed to assassinate them, Jinn and Kenobi were driven to the planet's surface. There, they rescued Queen Amidala and fled Naboo just as the invasion began. Sidious dispatched Maul to locate Amidala and the Jedi, since the Queen was vital for their objectives. Sidious needed the Queen's signature on a document that would legalise the Federation's unlawful conquest of Naboo. Maul intercepted a distress call from Naboo's government that Queen Amidala had received on Tatooine. A trio of Sith probe droids were sent out from its spacecraft to locate the Queen and her Jedi Guardians, discovering her ship just as it was about to depart. Qui-Gon Jinn was ambushed by the Sith Lord, and the two engaged in lightsaber combat. A young Anakin Skywalker was ordered by Jinn to board the spacecraft and instruct the pilot to launch. Maul used his frightening agility and brutal ferocity to exhaust Jinn in a brief but grueling fight. The Queen's ship arrived to Jinn's rescue, and the Jedi leapt aboard, leaving Maul seething. Despite that the Jedi and the Queen were able to escape, the Sith had exposed themselves for the first time in a millennium, and the Jedi Order were perplexed as to how this was possible. Regardless of his failure to catch Amidala, Maul revelled in his accomplishments and allowed hate and arrogance to consume him. What Maul didn't realise was that Skywalker, the young boy prophesied to be the Chosen One, would eventually replace him at his master's side. Following their escape from Naboo, the Jedi and the Queen travelled to Coruscant, where Sidious, under the guise of Senator Palpatine, convinced Amidala to call a vote of no confidence in Valorum. After this, Amidala and the Jedi returned to Naboo to battle the Federation occupancy. Maul also returned to Naboo by order of his master, eagerly anticipating another duel with the Jedi. The fight for the capital eventually reached the Royal Palace, where Maul awaited the Jedi. After engaging Kenobi and Qui-Gon in combat in the palace hangar, the Sith Lord moved on to the generating complex. Maul dominated the fight, but allowed them some ground so that he was able to separate the Jedi, and could fight Qui-Gon one-on-one. Maul bested Jinn in this duel, fatally stabbing the Jedi through the torso as Kenobi watched helplessly. When Kenobi finally caught up, the pair engaged in a fierce fight, with Kenobi filled with anguish and rage over the murder of his master and friend. Maul disarmed Kenobi and force-pushed him over the edge of a huge reactor shaft. Kenobi was left hanging from a tiny nozzle over the chasm. The young Jedi was taunted by Maul as he sought to knock him off the ledge, but Kenobi collected and calmed himself, and then used the Force to leap back up and call forth Jinn's lightsaber into his grasp. In a second, Kenobi swiped the blade through Maul's waist, slicing him in half and sending him plummeting to his apparent death. The same day, Palpatine was appointed Supreme Chancellor of the Galactic Republic. He and the Jedi were of the belief that Maul had perished on Naboo. As a result, Sidious made Count Dooku his new apprentice. However, through his hatred and resolve to survive, Maul utilised the Force to grab an air vent whilst plunging down the reactor shaft, and ultimately made it to a garbage dump. Maul's broken body was dumped on the junkyard planet of Lotho Minor, where he dwelt deep under the planet's surface. There, he created a six-legged device for himself out of scrap metal that gave him the ability to walk once more. Years of residing on this desolate planet drove Maul insane, but he remained driven by thoughts of revenge against Obi-Wan Kenobi. Mother Talzin was aware that Maul had lived through his battle with Jyn and Kenobi. During the Clone Wars, she informed Savage Opress, Maul's brother, that the former Sith Lord could be found in the Outer Rim, and gave him a talisman to help track him down. Savage travelled to Lotho Minor, where he eventually found his brother in a state of madness and despair. Savage was unknown to Maul, who was also struggling to maintain his own sense of self. The former Sith Lord was reduced to nothing more than his desire for vengeance against Kenobi. Savage took Maul back to Dathomir, where Mother Talzin used an incantation to mend Maul's psyche and provide him a set of cybernetic legs. Additionally, this restored Maul's memories. As soon as his mind was restored, Maul left Dathomir to find Kenobi, seeking vengeance for the loss he had suffered on Naboo 10 years prior. In order to draw Kenobi out, he slaughtered an entire village on Raydonia and successfully captured the Jedi Master. Asajj Ventress, a former disciple of Count Dooku and Mother Talzin, managed to free Kenobi from Maul and Opress, and for the first time in more than a decade, Kenobi and Maul clashed. Kenobi became overwhelmed with hurt and fury when the Sith recounted the death of Qui-Gon, and decided it would be better for him and Ventress to escape. Following this, the two brothers began a rampage across the galaxy, completing heists to earn credits. Maul disarmed his brother to prove his superiority in the martial arts, winning his siblings' respect. In the same manner of the customary Sith rule of two dynamic, Maul began referring to himself as Savage's master. They left the Cyblock system with the valuables and travelled to Florum, where they paid a group of Hondo Ohnaka's pirates to join them. Some joined, while others questioned the brothers' intentions and perished as a consequence. The two were eventually confronted by Kenobi and Adi Gallia, who had traced them there. Gallia was killed in the duel that followed. After Savage had his arms severed, the brothers managed to escape the planet, although they eventually passed out from a lack of oxygen in their escape pod. As they drifted aimlessly throughout outer space, Death Watch, the Mandalorian splinter group commanded by Pre Vizsla, discovered them unconscious and clinging to life. When Vizsla found Maul's lightsaber, he opted not to kill them as his lieutenant Bo-Katan had requested. Vizsla reasoned that if they were enemies of the Jedi, they could assist them, and they were taken back to Death Watch's base on Zanbar. It was there that Maul was interrogated by Vizsla and Bo-Katan, and revealed himself to be a Sith. The Mandalorian extremists were also told by him that Obi-Wan Kenobi was to blame for their exile from Mandalore. Maul suggested an alliance between the brothers and Death Watch, claiming that it was the will of the Force. Bo-Katan rejected his offer, criticising the Sith as being no better than the Jedi. Maul responded by force choking her, and promised the Mandalorians that thanks to their alliance, Mandalore would be theirs, and they would have their revenge against Kenobi. Savage awoke from his coma, and Maul informed him of his plan. He asserted that their ambitions would be better served by Death Watch, and once they had retaken Mandalore, they would utilise its resources to further their own ambitions, with Death Watch acting under their direction. This marked the beginning of the Shadow Collective. The Alliance then went to Mustafar to enroll the Black Sun into their growing army. Their leader, Zaiton Moj, welcomed them and led them to their council. Maul asked the council to join them, but his offer was refused. After giving them a second chance to reconsider, Savage ignited his lightsaber and threw it across the table, decapitating the council members and convincing Moj to join the Shadow Collective. The Pikes likewise swore allegiance to the Sith brothers. In a bold move, Maul and the Shadow Collective besieged Jabba's palace on Tatooine. Overwhelmed by the Death Watch, Jabba agreed to lend the Hutt's support to the Collective. Now that they had an army at their disposal, Maul and the Shadow Collective intended to topple the government of Duchess Satine on Mandalore. The criminal elements were sent to assault the capital city Sundari in order to give the Duchess the appearance of weakness, when Death Watch would arrive and drive them away, gaining the support of the people of Mandalore. However, as Maul had anticipated, Vizsla and Bo-Katan betrayed the brothers, imprisoning him and Savage and declaring themselves the leaders of Mandalore. After they managed to escape from their cells, Maul and Savage sought a new ally who could act as a puppet leader, choosing Almec, the former Prime Minister who had been jailed for corruption. Maul marched into the Mandalorian throne room and declared an honourable deathmatch with Pre Vizsla, knowing that the victor would receive the loyalty of Death Watch members. After an extensive and brutal battle, Vizsla was beheaded by Maul with his own weapon, the ancient Darksaber, which Maul then claimed as his own. However, Bo-Katan and some of the Mandalorians refused to swear allegiance to Maul, causing Death Watch to split in two. Almec was reinstated as Prime Minister, but Maul remained the true authority on Mandalore. Soon after the Death Watch takeover, Maul received word that the Duchess had attempted to escape from custody and had sent a distress signal to the Jedi. After learning of Kenobi's previous relation with Satine, Maul realised that she could be used as bait for his archenemy, and the ideal weapon for his vengeance against the Jedi Master. Maul was aware that Mandalore was a neutral state, and therefore the Jedi Council would not approve a rescue operation, leaving Kenobi to undertake this mission alone. After Kenobi successfully liberated the Duchess from captivity, they attempted to flee, but their ship was shot down. Maul disarmed the Jedi and brought him and the Duchess to the palace. Maul taunted Kenobi to succumb to the dark side by holding Satine in a force choke. Kenobi refused, telling Maul that he had visited the Sith Lord's village on Dathomir. He then brought up Maul's past, claiming that the Nightsisters had forced him to embrace the dark side. These statements angered Maul. He reminded Kenobi that it was him who had caused his suffering for the past 10 years, and that now he would partake in his anguish. Maul ignited the Darksaber and plunged it through the Duchess's chest. Satine died in Kenobi's arms before he was transported to the prison to reflect on his loss. Later, Bo-Katan, who revealed herself to be Satine's sister, assisted in Kenobi's escape from Mandalore. A civil war then broke out between Bo-Katan and her Night Owls and Maul's Death Watch. After learning of Maul's operations through Master Kenobi, Darth Sidious arrived at the royal palace. He had seen that Maul was becoming more powerful and had become a rival. Maul told his former master that he had conquered Mandalore and assembled an army in the goal of once more becoming Sidious's pupil, but Sidious saw through his ruse and unleashed a vicious attack on Maul and his brother. They were unable to match Sidious's tremendous strength, and he stunned Maul by using the Force to throw him into a wall, before taking on Savage Opress alone. Maul regained consciousness just in time to see his brother be impaled by Sidious's two red blades. In his closing moments, Savage voiced regret for failing his brother as his apprentice, while Sidious laughed over them. He reminded Maul that there could only be two Sith, and that he had long been replaced. In a fit of fury, Maul lit both his own lightsaber and the Darksaber and attacked his former master. Though Maul was more resilient than Savage, he was finally defeated and disarmed by the Dark Lord of the Sith. Maul begged for forgiveness, but Sidious responded that there was no such thing amongst the Sith, and began to sadistically torture him with Force lightning. He revealed that he had no intention of killing Maul, as he still had plans for him, including drawing Mother Talzin out into the open so that she might be defeated too. Following the fight on Mandalore, Maul was imprisoned on the isolated world of Stygian Prime in the Spire. Sidious's ship was followed by Maul's Death Watch forces under Almec's instructions, with the goal of rescuing their captive leader. Maul became outraged when his successor Count Dooku arrived. Dooku questioned his predecessor, electrifying him in an attempt to obtain information about the Shadow Collective, but Maul resisted. After Dooku left, Rook Kast and Gar Saxon of Death Watch raided the prison and liberated their leader. Unbeknownst to Maul and the Death Watch, the Sith had anticipated this and hoped that Maul would lead them to Mother Talzin. On Zambar, more of Death Watch regrouped, and Maul regained the Darksaber, assuring the Mandalorians that their longing for blood and war would now be fulfilled. General Grievous's separatist forces arrived on Zambar soon after, and conflict ensued, leaving severe casualties on both sides. Maul took down 4 of Grievous's Magna Guards before taking on the cyborg alone. Despite Maul's obvious superiority in power, Grievous sent Maul flying back with a kick, and the Death Watch leader instructed his men to retreat after the majority had been killed. On Dooku's orders, believing Maul would seek aid from Mother Talzin, Grievous allowed Maul to escape. As Dooku had expected, Maul contacted Mother Talzin, but the Dark Witch anticipated a trap from Sidious and ordered Maul to Ord Mantell to orchestrate a kind of counter-trap to capture Dooku and Grievous. Maul worked with the Black Sun and the Pike Syndicate to rapidly devise a strategy to lure the Separatist army into the territory controlled by the Shadow Collective. The Separatists appeared, bombarding the surface of the planet from their starship fleet. Using Mandalorian warships, Maul and Death Watch launched a counter-offensive on the fleet in orbit, attacking Grievous's command ship. They boarded the vessel and destroyed the battle droids defending the cyborg general. Maul then subdued Grievous and gave him an ultimatum: destroy the signal that powered the droids leading the ground assault, or perish. With reluctance, Grievous disabled the signal and was detained. Once the droids had been disabled, Dooku, who was fighting on the surface, was also captured. Maul contacted Sidious and told him of his victory against Dooku and Grievous. Sidious instructed Maul to murder the two, claiming that he had no further use for them, but Maul had other ideas. Grievous was locked away, and Dooku brought before him. He proposed that he and Dooku may become natural allies, since they had both been deceived by Sidious. Dooku declined Maul's offer, believing that Sidious could not be challenged. Meanwhile, a Republic assault team, led by Mace Windu, Tipley, Ayla Secura and Kenobi, stormed the supply station. They had followed the Shadow Collective from Ord Mantell. As there was no other choice, Dooku joined with Maul, while Grievous used an escape pod to flee the carnage. A lightsaber fight between Maul and Dooku and the Jedi ensued, until Rook-Kar set off an explosion, allowing Maul and Dooku to flee. On Dathomir, Dooku was taken before Mother Talzin, who attempted to use her magic to draw his life force in order to restore herself to her former level of power. However, they were interrupted by the arrival of Grievous and Sidious. While Maul engaged the general, Talzin took on Sidious, who swiftly outmatched her, blasting her with Force Lightning. After fending off Grievous, Maul begged his mother to use his own life force to grow more powerful, but Talzin demanded her son to retreat. Maul was hauled away by members of Death Watch and watched as Grievous fatally impaled Talzin. Maul and his few remaining troops escaped as Dathomir and the Shadow Collective fell to the Separatists. Despite his escape, Sidious no longer deemed Maul a threat to his future domination of the galaxy. Maul and his most loyal warriors would eventually return to Mandalore, where they remained in hiding for a short while. Eventually, the Shadow Collective would be reformed, though not to its former degree of strength. In a vision, Maul foresaw Anakin Skywalker as the key to Sidious's success, and therefore wanted to lure him and Kenobi to Mandalore. He hoped to rob Sidious of his future apprentice and exact his final revenge on Kenobi. During the final days of the Clone Wars, Maul and his forces were besieged by Bo-Katan's legion of Mandalorians and a company of clone troopers led by Ahsoka Tano and Commander Rex. The Shadow Collective informed Maul that a Jedi was on the planet. Assuming the Jedi was Kenobi, he ordered a trap to be set. The Shadow Collective lured Ahsoka and the clones into the Undercity, killing all of them but Tano. Maul told Ahsoka that he had been expecting Kenobi and inquired why she was there instead. When Ahsoka urged Maul to surrender, he said it would be meaningless, explaining that the Jedi Order and the Republic would soon be burned to ashes, and that the galaxy would fall under Sidious's control. Clone forces then arrived and opened fire, forcing Maul's forces to fall back. After learning that his puppet politician Almec had been captured, he ordered Gar Saxon to assassinate him before he revealed any important information to the enemy. Ahsoka, Bo-Katan and Rex entered Maul's throne room, with Bo attempting to take on the Sith. Maul effortlessly deflected her blaster bolts and subdued her. Ahsoka ordered her allies to leave, and she was left alone with Maul. Outside, the battle raged on as Maul spoke calmly to Ahsoka, reminding her of the Jedi's hypocrisy that had caused her to leave the Order, and that soon, the whole galaxy would be altered by Sidious's hand. Ahsoka recommended that Maul join the Jedi in preventing Sidious's seizure of power, but Maul insisted that they were too late. Maul inverted the offer, inviting Ahsoka to join him in destroying Sidious side by side. After much thought, Ahsoka accepted on one condition, that Maul explain what he wanted with Anakin. He claimed him to be the key to everything, to destruction, and that he foresaw the future in which Sidious made Anakin his new apprentice. After Ahsoka accused him of lying, Maul confessed that he had orchestrated the conflict on Mandalore in order to lure out Kenobi and Skywalker, and kill the latter before he became Darth Vader. When she heard this, Ahsoka changed her mind and ignited her lightsabers, refusing to believe that Anakin could turn to the dark side. The two then engaged in a fierce duel, in which Ahsoka proved to be a formidable opponent for Maul despite her lack of experience in comparison to the former Sith. Their battle moved outside, and after Gar Saxon contacted Maul for reinforcements, he abandoned him, allowing his Mandalorian warriors to be overrun by Republic clone troopers. Ahsoka caught up with Maul and the two continued to fight. Tano dodged his swings and grabbed Maul's saber, causing him to fall from the beam they were on, yet she chose to save him using the Force. Maul ordered Ahsoka to let him fall rather than be arrested, but she refused. Before being stunned and taken into custody, Maul yelled furiously at Ahsoka, telling her that she had just doomed them all. The Jedi High Council instructed Ahsoka to transport Maul to Coruscant so he could be tried for his crimes. Maul was imprisoned within a Mandalorian vault made to contain Force users and placed on board the Venator-class Star Destroyer Tribunal. However, en route to Coruscant, Palpatine issued Order 66, causing Commander Rex and the rest of the company to turn on Ahsoka. Whilst in captivity, Maul sensed these events. 2 clone troopers entered his cell to execute him, having received a separate order from Sidious, who wished to finally rid himself of his old apprentice. Ahsoka arrived and knocked the clones unconscious before Maul could be shot, releasing Maul from his restraints. He expressed amazement that the Jedi had lived this far. She then confessed that her forces had turned against her, and Maul chuckled at Sidious's brilliance in using the Jedi's army to destroy them. Maul explained that despite his former allegiance to Sidious, he was uninformed of the finer aspects of the scheme. He suggested a team-up with Tano, but she flatly refused, telling him that he was only to be a distraction to generate chaos and allow for an escape. Despite being unarmed, Maul tore a path of destruction throughout the ship, slaying every clone in his path. Maul made his way to the destroyer's hyperdrive chamber. Entering the chamber, he quickly eliminated any resistance before tearing the hyperdrive generators down, forcing the Star Destroyer to tumble out of lightspeed and become caught in a nearby moon's orbit. Maul then made his way towards the ship's hangar, desperate to find a means of escape as the ship began to plummet from the sky. When Ahsoka saw his shuttle taking off, she tried to stop him by grabbing it using the Force, but was eventually forced to let him go, allowing Maul to escape into hyperspace. As Maul foretold, Anakin Skywalker succumbed to the dark side, assuming the name Darth Vader and joining his new master Sidious at the helm of the newly formed Galactic Empire. Vader and his Inquisitors were dispatched to destroy the remnants of the Jedi Order, with Maul also becoming a target. However, he managed to remain elusive enough to his Imperial hunters that they began to refer to him as the Shadow. At some point, Maul returned to his homeworld of Dathomir, where he became the shadowy leader of crime syndicate Crimson Dawn, with Dryden Voss as his figurehead. Following Voss's death in 10 BBY, Maul was contacted by his underling Kira, who informed him that Voss had been betrayed and assassinated by Tobias Beckett, and that his shipment of coaxium had been stolen. After elevating Kira to the status of the late Dryden Voss, he summoned her to Dathomir. Maul educated Kira about the Sith Order, revealing Emperor Palpatine to be the Dark Lord of the Sith known as Darth Sidious. He also revealed his intention to use Crimson Dawn to bring down the Empire. The former Sith began looking for new ways to destroy his enemies, knowing that both Kenobi and Sidious were not to be underestimated. He scoured worlds in search of some advantage, choosing to locate an ancient Sith holocron. Maul's pursuit for the holocron finally led him to the planet Malachor, where he hoped he would find the weapon in the ancient Sith temple. However, during his time there, his ship became wrecked, leaving Maul trapped on the planet for years. An Inquisitor, known as the Eighth Brother, traced Maul to Malachor in the year 3 BBY. It was also about this period that Maul met the young Jedi Ezra Bridger. Introducing himself as the Old Master, Maul claimed to be on the hunt for the same Sith holocron as Ezra was, and volunteered to assist him in obtaining it. Maul began to influence the young Jedi as he agreed to work together to claim the holocron. Maul informed Bridger of his past, adding that the Sith had taken everything from him. Ezra grew to trust and relate to Maul more, and Maul slowly imparted the ways of the dark side to him, preying on the boy's passionate and aggressive instincts. With Maul guiding Ezra, the two were successful and located the holocron at the ancient temple. They then encountered Ezra's master, Kanan Jarrus, and Ahsoka Tano, who were fighting with the 8th brother, 5th brother, and the 7th sister. While Ahsoka and Kanan were hesitant to trust Maul, the three of them forced the Inquisitors to flee. Maul knew that the Inquisitors would inform Vader of the confrontation, and that soon the Sith Lord would arrive. Maul warned the others that they would have to work together to destroy him. Still untrusting of Maul, Kanan and Ahsoka only cooperated at the request of Ezra. The group scaled the temple, where Maul believed they could acquire the knowledge needed to destroy the Sith. Maul and Ezra battled the 7th sister along the way, with Maul quickly subduing her with a force choke. Maul urged Ezra to execute her, but he hesitated, and Maul hurled his lightsaber at her, killing her. Maul attempted to corrupt the young Jedi further, scolding him for his reluctance, and warning him that it could cost his life or the lives of those he cares for. At that moment, Maul felt the presence of Darth Vader, knowing he was close. They re-encountered Kanan and Ahsoka, who were fighting the two remaining Inquisitors. Maul assisted Ahsoka and killed the 5th brother, and Kanan was able to damage the 8 brothers' lightsaber. When he attempted to flee using this weapon, it malfunctioned, and the Inquisitor plunged to his death. With Ezra out of view as he continued to the holocron, Maul betrayed the Jedi and struck Kanan, blinding him. Then Maul engaged Tano in a lightsaber duel and disclosed his intentions to attempt to make Bridger his apprentice. As Kanan recovered, Ahsoka left to retrieve Ezra and face Darth Vader. Maul severely underestimated the blind Jedi, promising to kill him in a flash. Kanan caught Maul's arm, tripped him up using the Force, and sent him falling from the temple to the ground below. After the Sith temple was destroyed in the ensuing battle between Vader and Ahsoka, Maul managed to escape the planet using one of the Inquisitor's advanced TIE fighters. Following these events, Maul's influence had a significant effect on Ezra, and he began to veer further towards the dark side. Maul reappeared a few months later and began to hunt down the rebels. He learned the whereabouts of Ezra's ship and residence, the Ghost, after interrogating a captured rebel soldier. Ezra and Kanan returned to find their ship gone and their crew abducted, and learnt that Maul was responsible. Maul contacted them, demanding the Jedi give him the 2 holocrons that they had found, in exchange for their friend's safe return. While the 2 Jedi returned to Atollon to retrieve the Sith holocron, aboard the Ghost, Maul probed Hera Syndulla's mind. From this, he learnt of the Jedi holocron's location aboard the ship. Maul landed the Ghost at the rendezvous point of this exchange, a Mandalorian asteroid outpost, and put his captives under the supervision of his droids. When they arrived, Maul instructed Ezra to accompany his droids to the rest of the Ghost's crew, while he went with Kanan. Once alone, he pushed Kanan into an airlock, ejecting him into space. Maul proceeded to meet Ezra, believing Kanan to be dead, and discreetly ordered one of his droids to slaughter the rebel crew. Maul and Ezra sat on the floor and swapped holocrons. They opened the devices, hoping to combine them and have their questions answered. Ezra saw a number of familiar and unfamiliar locales, whilst Maul saw nothing. The Ghost crew, who had been rescued by Kanan, quickly made their way to Ezra and Maul, blinded by the light streaming from the holocrons. Ezra yelled that he saw twin suns, and Kanan begged his apprentice to look away, while Maul urged the Jedi to concentrate. Bridger closed his eyes, causing the energy from the holocrons to erupt, allowing Maul a chance to escape. Maul returned to his ship, realizing what he had seen, and repeating the words, "He lives." Due to these events, a mental link between Maul and Ezra developed. This allowed him to use the dark side to manipulate and torment Ezra, as well as locate his base on Atollon. Maul reappeared before Kanan and Ezra whilst in the wilderness, and explained that he required Ezra to accompany him in order to recover the fragments of the holocron vision from his mind. When Kanan refused, the Darksider threatened to trigger a homing beacon, alerting the Empire to the rebels' whereabouts. Maul offered to show Ezra the secret to destroying the Sith, and, to Kanan's disappointment, Ezra complied with Maul's ultimatum. Without the former Sith knowing, Kanan and Sabine Wren placed a tracker on Ezra. Maul then took his unwilling apprentice to his homeworld Dathomir, specifically to the ruins of the Nightsister lair, where Maul had taken up an abode. He had filled the cave with artifacts from his past, including the Darksaber. In order for Maul to retrieve the information he needed, the two Force users consumed glasses of magic water, causing their eyes to glow green. From this, Maul and Ezra learnt that his nemesis Kenobi was hiding on Tatooine, and that he held the key to destroying the Sith. Following a struggle with Nightsister spirits, Maul offered Ezra a place as his apprentice, claiming their destiny was linked by the planet with twin suns. However, Ezra refused to abandon his friends, and Maul informed him of his disappointment, leaving to find his old enemy Kenobi. Using the information from the ritual, Maul made his way to Tatooine. While hunting for Kenobi in the desert wastelands, he realised he was well and truly lost. Exhausted by his quest and pondering death, he fell to his knees and began screaming Kenobi's name in despair. Kenobi! However, his fury gave him newfound determination, and he devised a plan to draw Kenobi out, using the Force to reach out to Ezra. After receiving the vision from Maul, Ezra travelled to Tatooine to stop the former Sith from killing Kenobi and potentially recruit him to the rebellion. Ezra landed in a canyon, before finding a fragment of the holocron left by Maul as bait. Ezra was then ambushed by Tusken raiders, surviving the attack but losing his ship in the process. Whilst Bridger and his droid Chopper debated their best means off of the planet, an apparition of Maul appeared, convincing him to head further into the desert. During a ferocious sandstorm, Ezra collapsed, but was found a short while later by Kenobi, who tended to the boy's injuries. When he awakened, Kenobi informed him that Maul had manipulated Ezra into leading him to Kenobi. At that precise moment, Maul arrived. Feeling guilty for compromising Kenobi, Ezra insisted on fighting Maul himself, but Kenobi ordered him to return to his friends. Ezra and Chopper left, with Maul bidding a final farewell to his apprentice. Mocking his foe for his living conditions, Maul remarked that death would in fact be a mercy for him, compared to the exile and solitude he was now forced to live in. Kenobi responded saying that Maul had nothing. His hollow aspirations to rule and murder had left him a broken man with nothing and no one. Stung by his words, Maul ignited his lightsaber. Knowing that Kenobi was not merely hiding, Maul speculated as to what might have led him to Tatooine. He deduced that he was there to protect something, or someone. He could see where Kenobi's mind dwelled, on a boy. Kenobi ignited his lightsaber and assumed his usual fighting stance, stirred to action by Maul's frightening words. In turn, Maul ignited his second blade, and the two lifelong enemies locked gazes. In a calculated move, Kenobi changed his stance, and Maul recognised it to be that of his master, Qui-Gon Jinn. He charged at Kenobi, and the pair exchanged two quick strikes, before Maul raised the hilt of his saber to hit Kenobi in the face, the identical move that had allowed him to kill Qui-Gon decades previously. However, Kenobi had anticipated this, and, as Maul initiated his killing blow, the Jedi brought his lightsaber down in an overhand strike, passing straight through the hilt of his saber and slashing a lethal wound into Maul's chest. Stunned, Maul stared down at his wound. He switched his lightsaber off and dropped to one knee, but was caught by Kenobi before he hit the ground. Seeing that his demise was unavoidable this time, Maul pleaded with his sworn foe to reveal if the child he protected was indeed the chosen one. Kenobi, sensing Maul's agony and need for closure, affirmed that the boy was truly the one prophesied to destroy the Sith. With this knowledge, Maul appeared to reconcile with his impending demise. Uttering his final words, he conveyed that the young boy would one day seek retribution for the suffering inflicted upon them both by Darth Sidious. After enduring so many years of torment and suffering, Maul eventually found peace in his passing, holding the belief that one day his master's power would end. As a final act of compassion, Kenobi gently shut Maul's eyes and laid him to rest. I hope you enjoyed this video on the entire life of Darth Maul. If there are any other characters who you would like to see a similar video for, let us know in the comments. And as always, may the Force be with you.